Welcome. I'm Steve Young, the current Global Executive Director of the Caux Roundtable. It has been 25 years since the first meeting of the Roundtable took place at Mountain House in Caux, Switzerland in 1986. The following video will give you a short introduction to the vision, mission, history, and to some extent the accomplishments of the Caux Roundtable. We will hear from Robert McGregor, Chuck Denny, who were two of the early participants and very much involved in drafting of the Caux Principles for Business, the first comprehensive global set of ethical principles for business that were proposed and have been advocated around the world, and from Mike Olson, the first executive director of the Caux Roundtable. And after we hear from them, I will be back for some concluding words.
Caux Roundtable really began in 1986 when the trade imbalances in the world were getting out of proportion. Japan had extended its trade significantly and also opened operations in Europe and America, and many companies, competitors, and governments were becoming fearful that the Japanese were using unfair trade practices to gain a long-term marked advantage in the marketplace. And so even one Japanese newspaper, a very prominent one, portrayed the Japanese companies as samurai warriors with swords in their hands out to cut up the world. And so Fritz Phillips thought somebody had to do something about this, and he did not think that the politicians would get around to dealing with these difficult issues. He had had a lot of business dealings with Japan, and he had a lot of trust and confidence in the Japanese counterparts that he knew. So after consulting with some of them, he decided to call the first meeting of the Caux Roundtable in 1986. And at that time, he set the tone and the ground rules for the nature of the dialogue that would take place. It was to be candid and open-minded, but deeply respectful. And that actually has turned out to be the standard for the Caux Roundtable even to this day. He believed that respectful, responsible businessmen could make the difficult decisions not only about business, but about society that involved moral and ethical questions that eluded others. And so if I may quote from him briefly, he has such clear, simple, wise language. He said, "First, we should engage in honest dialogue and learn better to listen to each other. Don't be too worried about reaching agreement, but reach a deep understanding. And second, in this dialogue, you should aim for real friendship and trust. And third, you should look at the moral issues and be guided by clear values and a sense of responsibility. And fourth, and this is a very wise insight, it came from his time at the Caux site when he worked there at times with Initiatives of Change, a nonprofit organization that worked for reconciliation, especially between France and Germany and Japan and the Allied nations after World War II. He said, do not start with a declaration of what the other people should do, but start with your own company and begin to make the changes that will solve the problem.
In 1994, I think it was, I took the Minnesota Principles to the Caux Roundtable meeting and proposed to the assembled group that they now adopt corporate responsibility as their major mission. They were instantaneously sympathetic to the idea. But the most interesting thing that happened is that our leadership at that time was the chairman of Canon, Ryoburo Kaku, a mathematician by training, a philosopher by bent, and a business genius. Also an individual who had survived the Hiroshima atomic attack and was ill with radiation sickness all his life. He agreed that we should pursue this as a mission, but he very importantly raised the issue that it was totally written from a Western perspective. Eurocentric, Greco-Roman, Judaic-Christian. And even though we thought we had paid attention to the Far East, we had only skimmed the surface. And so he brought forward the principle that he had been pursuing in Japan, and it was called Caux. And the kanji symbol is like a menorah with the fingers intertwined and coming up, and it means living and working together for the common good. So it is a communitarian concept as opposed to ours, which was an individual and human dignity-based concept. And what I remember best about that meeting is that after we'd had the first day's discussion and our dinner, we all went to bed tired, and I got up at about 2 a.m. in the morning. My poor wife was trying to sleep, and I began to rewrite everything we had written to include the concept of Caux. And by 7 o'clock in the morning, or 8, I had it ready in time to take to Chairman Caux as he had his breakfast, and somebody interpreted it for him. And I sat there, of course, in fear and trepidation that the work had been for naught or it wasn't any good. And instead, he smiled and he gave his approval. And so with that, the Minnesota principles were metamorphosized into the Caux principles, which have since been improved by the Caux organization over the many, many years. And taking it to Caux was the right thing to do.
The purpose of business is to serve society. Profit is our reward for serving society well. His brother, Bruce Dayton, said, "We believe that the great work ahead for business is to ensure that our cities regenerate themselves as dynamic centers socially, economically, and culturally." This is moral capitalism, and this is what we're trying to do today. And as I travel the world and I meet with people around the world that are arguing about all these issues, I believe the most important organization for businesses today is the Caux Roundtable. We have the best message to restore capitalism the way it's supposed to function on a moral foundation. Our executive director wrote a book on moral capitalism, and that's what it's all about. And so that's what the Caux Roundtable is trying to do today, is to build the foundation, the moral foundation under capitalism, and practice what Ken Dayton said: the purpose of business is to serve society. Profit is our reward for serving society well with integrity. And that's what the Caux Roundtable is about, and I'm excited about it, and I'm really privileged to be able to carry this message around the world. And the Caux Roundtable has the foundation that the business community needs. It's the best way to grow our economies. It's the best way to create jobs that our young people want all over the world.
I see several advantages and several real strengths that the Caux Roundtable adds to our society. And these are reasons that I support Caux Roundtable. First is, I find the communication and the information that I get from Caux Roundtable extremely valuable. Things like the roundtables, the global forum, and the newsletter, I find very useful tools for keeping aware of trends in corporate social responsibility, being aware of what is changing and how other companies are responding. The second advantage and purpose that I see for the Caux Roundtable is that of advocate, both with businesses and with governments. Caux is working very well, I think, with a number of developing countries and governments around the world, helping them progress more quickly to what we would say is a more developed economic system of behaviors and corporate social responsibility. Many of those countries see role models in Western society. There are things that they want to replicate, and I think Caux is participating with government entities and with NGOs to help move them along quicker along that path. And then the third advantage that I see out of Caux, a very important tool, is their Arcturus assessment tool. Arcturus is a tool that helps a company assess the CSR risks that exist throughout the company. I find it very useful in helping understand where risks might be, what are the higher risk areas from a CSR perspective. and just letting me be more aware of how my people in the organization feel. So all in all, I think the principles add an awful lot to business, can be very valuable for business, and have been very valuable for me. I'm a strong supporter of the Roundtable. I think it's an organization that deserves and needs support from all of us, and one that is a strong voice for a more moral and sustainable capitalism.
At the present time, the work of the Roundtable takes place in the United States, 10 other countries where we have leaders or teams. We have a global network of some 3,000 people, business executives, professionals, academics, in and around government. The vision of the Roundtable is a moral capitalism, a form of business enterprise where private initiative is consistent with the common good. And we work with principles, we have management tools, we work with values across cultures, across religions. We have workshops, seminars, and roundtables. We issue a monthly publication, and we try to bring to the fore both the ideas and the moral vision and the practical aspect of how such a system of moral capitalism can actually work uniformly around the globe, regardless of culture or people, recognizing the common core of humanity and our common aspirations to live well, to live justly, and to have an opportunity while we are in this time and space to do as best we can with the material resources that are made available to us. Thank you very much for listening. Our work is important. What we are doing across cultures and religions is perhaps unique, and we very much need and ask for your support.